Good morning. Welcome to an online event brought to you by Parkinson's Community Los Angeles. Today, we are so fortunate to have with us the founders of Women's Parkinson's Project, Richelle Flanagan, Kat Hale, and Sripathy. I'm Angela Neff, and I serve on PCLA's board of directors. For those who don't know us, we are a nonprofit that supports families living with Parkinson's through free education programs like this one, support group meetings, social events, and more. Today's Let's Talk Parkinson's is brought to you by our generous sponsors, Abbott, Boston Scientific, Kiowa Kirin, Medtronic, and Supernus, and by donations from people just like you in the Parkinson's community. If you appreciate what we do, please consider making a donation at www.pcla.org. And thank you in advance. We really rely on your generosity and support, which helps us continue this important work. Please join me in welcoming the founders of Women's Parkinson's Project. Richelle lives in Dublin, Ireland, and is a registered dietitian who was diagnosed with WPD shortly after the birth of her second child. She was an ambassador for the World Parkinson's Congress in Barcelona 2023. She is particularly passionate about two areas. One, the importance of diet for PD, and two, the unmet needs of women with PD. She is a co-founder of the Women's Parkinson's Project at www.womensparkinsonsproject.com and co-founder of a digital startup, My Moves Matter, www.mymovesmatter.com, a digital self-care companion to empower people with Parkinson's to live better lives. Kat, with a K, is from Portland, Oregon, USA. She believes that we can choose joy in our lives no matter what we are faced with. Movement, mindfulness, and gratitude help her navigate the challenges of living with young onset Parkinson's disease. After her diagnosis at age 48, she left her career as a nurse midwife after delivering over 800 babies. Now she is an author and advocate for finding wellness despite a diagnosis. She speaks around the world for the World Parkinson's Congress and the Davis Phinney Foundation, and also is a co-founder of the Women's Parkinson's Project. Her co-authored book titled Being Well with Chronic Illness, Hatherley Press, is available at all book outlets. She also hosts the podcast PD Lemonade on Apple iTunes and Spotify. You can find her at www.cathill.org. Sree first noticed motor symptoms when her left arm stopped moving during an evening walk. She was quickly diagnosed thereafter with young onset Parkinson's disease. Sree is a photographer and writer working full-time for a local online magazine based in California. Lastly, Sree is an ambassador for the Davis Phinney Foundation. Thank you for being with us. I'm so looking forward to hearing everything you do.
Thank you so much for introducing all of us, Angela. I wanted to introduce the Women's Parkinson's Project, our origin story, a little bit about our milestones, and the highlights on what each of us individually has been working on and what we've been working on together. And after that, I'm going to hand over the mic over to Richelle Flanagan, who's going to go discuss the unmet needs of women in PD, and then to Kat Hale, who's going to discuss menstrual cycles and women in PD. And we'll take it from there. So as you guys know, Richelle, Kat, and I are the co-founders of the Women's Parkinson's Project. And this is our origin story. We met originally in 2019 at Kyoto, Japan, the World Parkinson Congress, but we didn't actually really meet. We kind of virtually met. there was a big congregation of YOPDers that went in a room because we were just filled up with fire and passion about having our own conference. And Richelle was standing next to me. We never exchanged names. I don't even think we looked at each other. I remember her, but she doesn't remember me, which I tease her about all the time. And then Kat Hill walked into the room about 5 minutes after Richelle left. So we actually never really met until 2023. So 4 years later at the next World Parkinson Congress, which was in Barcelona. In June of 2019, I realized that I was missing out on connections with women with Parkinson's disease. So I started a women's WhatsApp group, and Richelle and Kat were part of that. Kat and I knew each other way back when from the WPC 2016, when we were buddies together as part of the World Parkinson's Congress Buddies program. So Kat was part of my WhatsApp group, and so was Richelle. I actually, to this day, don't remember how I contacted Richelle. I don't even know how I got her number. It just seems like magic. Somehow, magically, she just came into my life, and she stayed and remained a wonderful, dear friend since then. In March of 2020, I started a Marco Polo group, which is an app that we used to record voice notes to each other or video notes to one another. And those video notes can be played at any time. So it's like leaving each other little chat messages and video showing us what was going on in our lives, our family, our surroundings. And this was right before COVID hit, literally the 2 days before we went into shelter in place throughout the entire world. And that Marco Polo group, with a core group of 7 women with young onset Parkinson's disease or Parkinson's disease, really helped us get through those 2 to 3 years of COVID and the pandemic. And it was kind of key to, I think all of us would agree, the 3 of us would agree, to our survival in terms of just mental well-being. In March of 2021, Kat, Richelle, and I started the WPP. And in summer 2021, we launched a newsletter, website, social media. And then, as I mentioned, in July 2023, we met in person for the first time. In terms of our milestones, we've had our first blog post for women in PD as part of the World Parkinson Congress in February. We have collaborations with Conpay de Parkinson, a wonderful organization in Spain of women with Parkinson's, Twitchy Women and Strong Her Women. In March 2022, we had the first webinar on the unmet needs of women in Parkinson's disease, the gaps and controversies, in dual languages, in Spanish and in English, which is really amazing. I don't think there's been a webinar since then that has discussed women in dual languages, so we're really proud of that. And we partnered with the World Parkinson Congress to bring that to people. We've also increased our followers on social media. And the most important part, Kat, Richelle, and I are still very good friends, even after working together for 4 years. And we've had a lot of discussions, differences of opinion, but we've all made it work. One of the most exciting things that we did was Richelle presented a poster at the World Parkinson Congress in Barcelona of the work that we did with women in Parkinson's disease, our website, our starting foundations, all the work that we've done, and it got accepted, and we had a lovely poster tour. So we were really thrilled and excited about that. And now I want to go into a little bit about Richelle's story. Richelle is one of the most amazing people you can ever meet. She's a go-getter. She's such an advocate for women in PD and just an advocate for women in general. She's a WPC 2023 ambassador. She developed, as we all know, the first app for women with PD, My Moves Matter. This year, she won the Robin Elliott Award for Distinguished Contributions to the Parkinson's community. And hearing her speech made me cry and tear up. We might post that online if she gives us permission. But she hasn't given us permission just yet. She also was honored by the Trinity College Dublin, and I was able to be there to see her get that award. It was one of the best moments of my life to see my dear friend Richelle get honored that way. And she's also a registered dietitian advocating for nutrition for women with Parkinson's disease and for other people, not just women, but for everybody. Kat is a Davis Phinney Foundation ambassador, Living Well with PD Council member, and a speaker for the Davis Phinney Foundation. She was on the World Parkinson Congress Planning and Advocacy Committees. She's done a lot of work with PD Avengers, advocacy work with medication equity and women's groups. She co-authored an article in the International Journal of PD, which was super exciting. Yay, Kat, go. And most importantly, most recently, she was a co-author of a book called Being Well with Chronic Illness, which is in its second printing with Penguin Random House. And you can purchase that online on Amazon.com. And we are thrilled that she's our author and one of our members as a co-founder. And then there's me. So I'm a Davis Phinney ambassador. I was part of the WPC Buddies program coordination. I did a photo exhibit called 30 Days of Parkinson's Disease, which is detailing 30 days of Parkinson's through poetry, word, and photos. And part of that was exhibited in November 2022 in San Jose. I was featured in a YOPD book club, and I'm a staff photographer. So that's about it. Now we're going to go to the current state of women in Parkinson's disease, and I'm going to hand this over to Richelle. And Richelle, just let me know when I need to go to the next slide if I'm not able to keep up with you.
Okay, thanks a million, Sree, and thanks for the lovely, kind introductions to to us all. And yeah, just in terms of that note, in terms of, I can't remember, Sree, how we got each other. I think it might have been through Shane Breslin, maybe had his number, but I remember it very well. And it's connecting, and that's a really important part of the journey, I think, for Women's Parkinson's Project, was having other people who understood, and the two of us were working and young onset women, and we really kind of connected through that, and that's really where this wonderful relationship started from. So yeah, so grateful to be here. So I suppose in terms of the kind of backstory around the Women's Parkinson's Project and why we felt it needed to happen, was that we felt that there were needs that weren't being met in terms of current care for women and current research for women with Parkinson's. And really the idea probably stemmed very much from our discussions around how our symptoms got worse around our menstrual cycle. So I remember, beyond, the Marco Polo, and I'd be sort of mentioning that my symptoms were worse before my menstrual bleed, and Sree, like, oh, that's never happened to me as well. And then we noticed that there were other women on social media groups that were saying the same thing, and it's still happening every day. When we get diagnosed in young onset, they notice their symptoms get worse around their menstrual cycle. So we decided that we really needed to do some research around this, and we did a survey of women around the world, and there was 218 responses. And we did them in a Spanish survey, we did an English survey as well. But basically, in terms of that's quite small to see, so I'm just going to read out here in terms of the. So in total, there was 86% said that they found that their Parkinson's symptoms worsened around their menstrual period, and in fact, 96% of the Spanish respondents said that they got worse. And in terms of what symptoms they found suffered, so in the main, in terms of motor symptoms, it was rigidity, followed by bradykinesia, which is the slowness of movement, tremor, and dystonia got worse the week before their menstrual cycle. And in terms of it also tends to happen in the week of the bleed for 51% of women. It's about 74% is the week before the menstrual bleed. And in terms of the non-motor symptoms that were the most exacerbated, it was the fatigue, as far as fatigue, anxiety, and depression were the ones that suffered the most in terms of the non-motor symptoms. So as I mentioned there, sorry, I said it was 74. It's actually 81% of women still menstruating reported worsening of their symptoms the week before their period, and 51% the week of their period. So that's a really substantial amount of women. And then we also asked about the impact of perimenopause on symptoms. I know myself, as I went through perimenopause into menopause, that my symptoms, fluctuated all over the place. So we asked the question as well of women in the survey, and 50% said that their their symptoms got worse as they went through the perimenopause, and that 66% noticed that their symptoms fluctuated randomly during this time. And also what was really quite shocking was in terms of HRT, there wasn't a huge number of women who responded to this question, but so we've done a sort of another survey on this through the Michael J. Fox Foundation, which Kat might speak to. But in terms of neurology care, one of the real concerns was also in terms of about 95% of the women said that their neurologist did not speak to them about their hormones or the possible impact on their PD, did not discuss HRT or the menopause. So we really see that there's a big gap there. And that's really what we've been championing, is that we need to address this gap around hormones for women in terms of their management of their Parkinson's. So in terms of that survey, what we did is we had two webinars, one with the PMD Alliance and one with the Cure Parkinson Trust. And it was thanks to Helen Matthews and Indu Subramanian who helped facilitate those webinars through those two organizations. And we had almost 600 women between the two webinars who attended. And it's bigger than any webinar I've ever been on. And from that, we realized there were many issues that women were expressing, not just about hormones, but in terms of fear of, care in later life, issues with regard to stigma, issues with regard to working and looking after kids, very many different levels of needs that were not being met. So it was decided that we should do a paper. So interdisciplinarian, along with Dr. Adrian Keener and Professor Lena Morrow, alongside myself and two other Parkinson's advocates with Dr. Sonia Mather and Anne-Leanne Oostervan. We wrote this paper looking at the unmet needs of women living with Parkinson's disease. So this highlights here the differences between men and women. So in terms of women, you'll see here from motor symptoms, we tend to be more tremor dominant, we have more facial masking, we tend to suffer from more levodopa-induced dyskinesias and more restless leg syndrome. In terms of non-motor symptoms, mood and sleep disturbances are higher in women, as is anxiety and depression, fatigue and apathy, pain, and neurodevelopmental symptoms. And in terms of psychosocial issues, we tend to suffer from more psychological distress, self-reported disability, quality of life and presentation and diagnosis tends to be worse, a worse negative or destructive self-image, a loss of femininity, impaired sexual intimacy, feeling of not being heard, and often as a result of that not being heard is a downplaying of symptoms. And we also highlighted in terms of the different key areas of unmet need across different key phases of a woman's life, from the premenstrual worsening of symptoms, the role of hormone regulation, contraception, and also the importance of looking at family planning, impact on relations to career. And then obviously the very important issue of pregnancy, like counselling around that and making sure the woman with Parkinson's is kept safe, and also looking at medications. There's a lot of unknowns with regard to medications that we really need to research to drill into. Also, then a lot of women are concerned about breastfeeding, obviously, if they're on the medications. Then we got perimenopause in terms, again, another phase where the worsening of symptoms happen. And the difference between natural menopause and surgical menopause. So we know women who had oophorectomies have high risk of developing Parkinson's. And if they weren't put on HRT, they had a high risk of developing Parkinson's. And then the timing and type of HRT is really important, and the critical window of when to take it. And we need more research around this, because we know some women report that their symptoms improve in our HRT, and maybe some women not. So we need more information. And then postmenopause is really important, because that's probably the biggest cohort of women with Parkinson's. And that again is looking at how long do you keep going with HRT? Should you start HRT later? And there's some evidence to show that it may not be good to start it later after the critical window of menopause. Breast cancer obviously is an issue in terms of hormones that are used there. Bone health, osteopenia, osteoporosis. So in Ireland, for example, 1 out of 2 women in Ireland over the age of 50 or postmenopausally are at risk of osteoporosis. Pelvic floor dysfunction is a big issue. And then obviously the transition in social roles in terms of becoming a grandparent, for example, or retirement and managing that, and loss, because women tend to outlive men in their family. And so that has an impact in terms of women tend to end up in nursing homes with Parkinson's earlier than men do, because they lose the care partner. So from that paper, this is where Sree mentioned that we did the webinar in partnership with the World Parkinson's Congress. And in that, we basically saw that there were some key takeouts. And I suppose from a research perspective, 53% of women had never taken part in clinical trials. And we need to really see a change in that, because the only way we're going to actually improve the care for women is actually have them represented in clinical trials. In terms of some of the questions we asked prior to the survey, 47% of women were unsure if their hormones affected or had affected their Parkinson's. 26% felt their hormones did affect their symptoms. And also, we asked if the biggest concern was for women living with PD. The key areas included symptom management, hormonal impact of Parkinson's, the care needs of the future, and living alone with Parkinson's disease. So ultimately, we kind of felt at that webinar and the survey that really it demonstrated the need for advice for women under 60 regarding the impact of hormones on their Parkinson's. We also need to address women's concerns about future care. And we also need to ascertain why over 50% of women are not taking part in clinical trials. Is that because they're not being made aware of the clinical trials, or there aren't enough clinical trials that include women? And obviously a big area there is women who are of a younger age when they're menstruating, that can preclude them sometimes from taking part in trials because they have to be on birth control. So I think on that note, I'm going to hand over, segue to Kat to speak about the the next survey, larger survey.
Yeah, hi everybody, and thank you PCLA for having us on and for such warm welcome. I'm going to speak a little bit and kind of give a total pause and kudos to Richelle for getting the ball rolling around research. We all have from our young onset group that on the Marco Polo, when we set out to kind of find more information for ourselves, all of us found that there just wasn't information out there. I'm sure a lot of you out there listening can relate to that. And Richelle's initial survey and the GAPS paper really laid the foundation for the work that I have been involved with a group. And I think Christy's on this call. So with my co-author, Sonia Mather, who was also a co-author on the GAPS paper with Richelle, Helen Matthews, and myself, took the cueing from that GAPS paper and said, we need data. And we know that data drives care. And because we don't have information, we needed to start to find some ways to gather information. So along with the Michael J. Fox Foundation, we collaborated to put out a survey that speaks directly to women. And it's a multi-phased survey. In other words, it didn't come out all at once. We launched it last fall, so 2022. And we asked respondents in the first survey about their life and their lifestyles. And then the second survey was launched that spoke to pre-menopause, perimenopause, and postmenopause. We were interested in the data, and we found, not surprisingly, a lot of the same things that Richelle's survey found. We wanted to try to appeal to broader audiences. A vast majority of people that responded were postmenopausal, which reflected who currently has Parkinson's. We focused a little bit specifically around the menstrual cycle, and very much we found what Richelle found, that before the menses started were where women experienced the most challenge and symptoms. And we were curious again to confirm some of what Richelle's survey had found also. We found that off time was exacerbated. Stiffness and tremor were both more noticeable, dystonia and bradykinesia. We also were very interested in some of the non-motor symptoms, and many of us seem to, especially women, we have more severe non-motor symptoms. So what specific symptoms were more difficult during their period time? And fatigue, difficulty swallowing, and some of the other anxiety, depression symptoms were exacerbated, which was consistent again with the GAPS study. We're hoping that this data is a starting point for researchers to come in and look at. It's open source. Anybody can come into the Michael J. Fox Foundation data and use that to launch other studies. We wanted to talk a little bit too about other motor symptoms, about pain, increased sweating, and poor gastric motility were the most troublesome to women during their period time. So clearly, we are seeing a pattern that women premenstrually are suffering and their medicines aren't working as well. And we wanted quantifiable data that could be shared, that other researchers could launch projects from. We asked, is your medicine working just globally overall? And almost half are saying that the week before their period, it was not as efficacious. There were also a high percentage of respondents that said they weren't sure. And I thought that this data was very telling, that we aren't even discussing or talking about in our appointments if our periods are different. Some of us don't even know that our medicine may not be as effective. So we want to track that information, because I think it's important for women to hear that we could do a better job of figuring out and tracking our symptoms. Thus, the app that the My Moves Matter app that Richelle has is going to be so valuable, because it will give us the information about our own bodies, and also be a tangible way to relay that to providers. Providers aren't talking about this in offices. And when I say providers, I mean your primary, anybody helping you with your Parkinson's disease. Most women aren't even asked, like Richelle's survey showed. I'm going to let Richelle talk more about this specific app. This is another tool, though, that can help us quantify and manage our own symptoms, but also be a tool where we can communicate the data of our experience to others. So I'll hand it to you, Richelle.
Thanks a million, Kat. Yeah, so I suppose in terms of the app, just to see, if you want to get the next slide there, Sree, please. So when this came directly out of the Unmet Needs paper that we wrote, that it was important that that women track their symptoms. So a tracking tool that needed to be designed to communicate with providers, to improve symptom tracking tool to include menstrual cycles, but it can also look in terms of menopause and postmenopause. We suggested in the paper that we develop tools to facilitate the discussion of hormonal factors to empower women to bring up these topics with their providers, and help to recognize specific and non-motor symptoms within women to help optimize their management and personalize the treatment to each individual woman. And then from a treatment perspective, that treatment needs to be actually based on a woman's body weight, their BMI, their body mass index, because we know in terms of recent research that women potentially absorb 25% more levodopa than men do. So it's a bit like the heart medications that they now realize that often women absorb an awful lot more. So that can have negative side effects. So in women, for example, they absorb more levodopa. It's potentially why they have more dyskinesias than men do. Also, we need to have something that facilitates the ability to build a trusting relationship between the patient and the healthcare provider, so that there's kind of shared decision making, and also a treatment that allows referral onto the relevant healthcare providers, such as physios, speech and language dietitian, that can really manage, the care for women in a more personalized way. And then also to offer women, tools that help them to actually kind of self-care for themselves, because we know there's a huge gap in services for people around the world with regard to access to therapists that could really make a difference to people's lives with Parkinson's. So things that help to guide lifestyle choices and diet, exercise, mind and body approaches, and also to facilitate social connection, because social connection is really important. And we saw that with COVID, that the research showed that people tended to worsen over COVID, and that was because of the lack of social contact. And if you think about it, dopamine is very much the neurotransmitter of connection. So when you're not connected, you're not firing your dopamine neurons that you have. So, and also to have self-care strategies for women. So I suppose this is where the My Moves Matter act came from. I actually was asked to take part by a fantastic organization called the Women's Brain Project, who've actually really helped on our paper of the unmet needs by the Chief Technical Officer there, Professor or Dr. Maria Teresa Ferretti. And she asked me to take part as a patient champion in a digital hackathon. So basically it was like, it was during COVID, where people came together to try and solve problems for people with different chronic conditions using technology. And so obviously from the paper, we had identified that we need tools to help women track their symptoms. So I put forward the idea of having an app that would track women's Parkinson's symptoms across their menstrual cycle. And we won the hackathon, and with that we got some funding, and I thought, right, we've got funding, I need to do something with this now. So with that, I basically then here in Ireland looked for other grant funding, and it was about developing a digital self-care companion that allows people to track their medications, the triggers such as their menstrual cycle, but it could be perimenopause, it could be when they're wanting to look at insights when they start a new medication. What are the patterns, what works for people and what doesn't work for people, and to help build kind of education programs and community to support people in the community to be able to manage their Parkinson's. So it's all about improving medication adherence, and also with regard to women specifically, if the medication, as was shown in the last survey, is actually not as effective during the menstrual cycle, that means that women are literally, with young onset or those who are still menstruating up to the age of 54, 55, could potentially have, you know, up to 2 weeks out of every month, their symptoms are even worse, because basically what happens is prior to the menstrual bleed, estrogen levels drop, and with your estrogen levels dropping, your dopamine drops. So obviously, as women with Parkinson's, we have low dopamine to start with, so then you get a double whammy before your menstrual bleed. And also, there are some women who suffer from a very severe form of premenstrual syndrome, which, you know, makes things even worse for them. So next slide there, please. So in terms of the idea of the app, it's basically to track your symptoms across your menstrual cycle, your perimenopause, but also, as I say, you can use it for tracking any of your symptoms regardless of hormonal stage. It is a neuro-friendly design, because this is something that fascinates me in terms of various apps that are out there. And it was the challenge that I found with my own symptoms, tend to be bradykinesia and rigidity. But also, you know, when we did workshops with women, you know, the times when you track are usually when your symptoms are the worst and you're most off. And it's very hard to engage with the mobile to do that. So we designed it very much with large buttons to make it easy interaction, but also the app allows you to log using video, voice to text, and voice recording, as well as images, because a picture can tell 1,000 words. So that's what we mean by sort of more neuro-friendly design. And ultimately what we want to do is help facilitate improving health outcomes for women with Parkinson's. So if anyone wants to take, you know, scan the code there, they can download it. It's free on the App Store, the Apple Store, and the Google Store. And I'd love people to, you know, to really give it a good bash. And also what we want to do is start to see patterns, so we can see, you know, the patterns in women. And also this is available for men, can use it as well, so we can see the differences between the two. We will be doing a pilot study with University College of Cork, actually, where we'll be asking women with young onset to actually track their symptoms across their menstrual cycle, so that we can actually develop prospective data, because the problem is there are no clinical guidelines without evidence. So we have to prove it with the evidence. So that's just the way the world is. So we're going to, you know, make that happen and get the evidence that we don't have women suffering like this in the future. So this is just, you know, showing here that it's been very much designed initially with women. All along the way, they fed in through focus groups, interviews. We interviewed neurologists. And what was really interesting, and when we interviewed 12 neurologists, and I asked them all, what is the thing that actually, you know, you see makes a difference between those who are doing better with Parkinson's, those who aren't? And categorically, they all said those who are taking control of the condition rather than the condition taking control of them, whatever stage you're at. And ultimately, these are just some of the comments that the women fed back. So I'm conscious of time and to move on to the next slide. What's next for women in PD? So I think I'll hand back over to Kate.
All right, Sree, I think that's me. So I think Richelle highlighted several points. Women need to be, we need more data from women, and we need women to participate in studies and surveys. That I want to highlight that the survey that we did for the Michael J. Fox Foundation includes multi-stages of life, including postmenopausal. We've already had 3,500 respondents to some of those studies, and there are more, some of those surveys, and more surveys are coming out. So I think collecting data is really the first stop in developing resources and solutions for women. Sree, next slide. I think I have some highlights about some specific pieces. There is a downloadable free guide that was put together by a work group of us, an international work group of us, including Christy LaMonica, who's on this call, called In Her Shoes. And we published it for the World Parkinson Congress in Barcelona. It is a guide from people with young onset Parkinson's to young women with Parkinson's, to just give some baseline information from friend to friend about what they can expect, and some guides of what to expect. It's free. It's at YOPDwomen.org. or Christy will probably, maybe you can put the link in the chat because I'm terrible with my hands in the moment. Anyway, it's in several languages. We published it for the Congress in English, Spanish, and in Dutch. So there's information out there. If you're wondering where to start, this is a good place. Next slide, Sree. There's the Michael J. Fox Foundation survey if you're interested. There's also a program started by Dr. Annalien Oosterman, who has co-authored the GAPS paper that Richelle has spoken about. She started a registry, an international registry for pregnancy and Parkinson's. So if you've had a baby while you've been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, you can sign up and input data again for that same reason. So there's ways to get involved, and you can see that link. It's pregspark.com. That link is also in the In Her Shoes brochure, which Annalien helped co-author. So how can you get involved? Submit your story to our Women's Parkinson's Project. Join a study. There's a great study match program through the Michael J. Fox Foundation. Answer the surveys on the Michael J. Fox Foundation. More are coming out. That we have a series of 5 surveys. You can find those on the Michael J. Fox links, but also on the PD Avengers site. There is a hyperlink to that survey. Track your cycle, track your symptoms, pay attention to your periods, download the My Moves Matter app, talk to your healthcare providers. If you're not being asked, bring it up. It's okay to do that. They may not have answers for you, but we need to be sharing what our symptoms are like. And also, if you don't have support out there, join a support group. Find your people. It makes a huge difference. People that do the best with chronic illness are those people that own their experience. The data supports it. That's what resilience is. So you're not alone out there.
So thank you so much, Richelle and Kat. Thank you, Angela, for the introduction. And we just want to say thank you to everyone who listened and who's here and who will listen in the future when you see the video on YouTube. And we are going to hand it over to Angela to take questions and ask us questions directly or take any from the audience.
Thank you. It was amazing. I feel so much more optimistic for women in Parkinson's right now. Thank you, ladies. You're doing amazing, amazing work. I would love to hear a little bit more about the book that you wrote, Kat, with Nancy.
Okay.
Would you, I think there's a lot more to be said than you were able to talk about. And maybe the graph on the back is really, I found that very useful.
Sure. Anyway. No, I'd be delighted to talk about that. Part of what Nancy and I were searching for when we were working on the book, I co-authored it with another woman with Parkinson's disease, were models that seemed to fit what we were trying to convey in our young onset support group, which was referred to as the happy hour group for a long time. We met at local pubs in the Portland area pre-pandemic. And we really wanted to focus on wellness, even though we had been given a diagnosis. And so we chose a model that's a spiral that's tight and small at the bottom, and with all the really good stuff at the top. I've never loved a model that is a pyramid where you have the really hard stuff at the bottom and there's really big pieces for that, and then all the good stuff at the top. So our wellness spiral talks about a transition that one might go through a diagnosis or a major life event. And that's down in the bottom, and that's kind of the bottom of the spiral that can, we call the rabbit hole spot. We've all been there. We've all had bad days. And the top of the spiral is about being well and intentional wellness. And it builds upon the idea that we all need each other. We all need to learn compassion for ourselves and for others. We need to find a community of people. We need to learn and think about what brings us joy in our lives. And ultimately, we can live a life that is intentionally well, despite the challenges that we all face. And it certainly is through the lens of young onset Parkinson's disease, but it's relatable for many people struggling with disease. And our publisher is Hatherley Press, but it's put out through Penguin Random House. If you're interested in looking at a copy, Barnes & Noble stocks the hard copies, and then they're available through all book outlets, so you can get them. So does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
in your bio, 3 of the things that said that you use to help you navigate the challenges of young onset Parkinson's is movement, mindfulness, and gratitude. I don't know if you want to mention anything about that. I mean, I could talk a little bit to it, but I'd love to hear, Sree, what you and Richelle also do to keep yourself sane and riding the wave, so to speak.
Why don't you guys, Sree and Richelle, you take that, and then I can chime in as needed.
I'll let Richelle go first.
So as soon as you mentioned about riding the wave, one of the things that I got into was actually to do with a fundraiser to send people with young onset to the World Parkinson's Congress, because you know, a number of us were so blown away about how it really helped us in 2019 Kyoto. So I did a fundraiser where I basically jumped into the sea for every day of the month of May, my birthday month. And I am not a sea-loving person. I'm a Taurian landlubber, but I decided to choose something that would put me out of my, you know, comfort zone. And what was fabulous was that a lot of friends came out and did the dunk with me. So I call it the dopamine dunk, because basically when you get in cold water, it surely boosts your dopamine. But actually the research would show that if you do anything outside of your comfort zone, it's good for your dopamine. So that was definitely.
There is also a lot that's said about, there's a big movement in fending off Alzheimer's and Parkinson's of jumping in cold, going from cold to hot.
Yeah, yeah. So I suppose in terms of the Norwegians and that, they've been doing it for years, you know, in terms of the sauna and the cold water. Obviously there's caveats for people, you know, to be careful about doing it. I almost didn't get through it. It was very cold here in Ireland. But so that's definitely a big part of my life now. I've been doing it at least once a week ever since, through the winter times. But I think one really key part was the community of women that come together to do the dunking. It just, the community of women just, you know, I don't know, we just nourish each other, and that's really good for my soul as well. So I suppose I'll pass to Sree.
Sree, do you care if I comment real quick? I just want to say there's an old study when I was practicing as a midwife that looked at hormone levels, feel-good hormone levels, when women connected with other women versus women connecting with men. And they actually produced more of those feel-good hormones when they were connecting with women. So I just think we can't underscore the physiologic parts of feeling good. And that's a lot of what the book's about. We've got to maximize how good we feel. And there's all kinds of data coming out now about cold plunge, and which is exactly what Richelle's been doing. And by the way, both Sree and I separately went in the sea and did a dunk with her in Ireland this year.
In Ireland, they did.
Ireland.
It was cold in the Atlantic, I can tell you.
It was cold. Okay, it's all yours.
Cold. Yeah, I'll tell you, Richelle and Kat are much braver than I am. I didn't realize that getting into the sea would be such a risky proposition. And I'm not a water baby at all. Richelle had to, I was clinging to her, and in about 30 seconds, I just leapt out of the water. You would not believe how fast I leapt out of that water, but it was fun. Yeah, well, so my contribution is taking cold showers. And let me tell you, that wakes you up plenty. Very cold showers. The rush of dopamine I get lasts for about 10 minutes, but that's 10 minutes where I could use it. What do I do to remain movement friendly, mindful, all that stuff? I read romance novels about vampires and werewolves. Yeah, shapeshifters. It's a great universe out there, guys. That's your perfect husband. Get a book boyfriend. They're great. But other than that, joking aside, which I'm not really joking, it's really true. I really keep in touch with my friends, Kat, Richelle, the group I've developed of YOPD women. Some of them are on here, Claudia, Christy, people who I've met in real life. They really, really are supportive to me. And I can call them almost at any time, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., you know, people in London, people in Europe, people across the world. Because there are days when, like right now, you know, I said I'm still on, but I'm really not on. My meds are not kicking in properly just yet. So it's, you know, 2 days past my period, and it's still a struggle to move and to get words out. And the people who understand that are women who've either been there, who can imagine what that's like, who know what I'm going through. and who are supportive. And it's that sense of touch that, whether it's virtual or physical, that really manages to bring me into focus and alignment. And I can't stress enough the importance of having female friendships, whether it's through your local Parkinson's organization, whether it's through finding them online, whether it's just your friends who don't have Parkinson's. Friendships with women are vital. Friendships with men too are important. Friendships in general are just important in this disease that we live with every single day of our lives. And nobody else gets it the way another woman with Parkinson's will get it. But if we only stick to people with Parkinson's, we're not educating everybody else. And it's not our job to go around educating other people. But at the same time, we have to really work hard not to shut ourselves off. I have to work hard to not shut myself off, because it's very easy to just stay in my bubble of people with Parkinson's disease who get it, but then I'm not doing the rest of my friends justice by letting them give me love and attention and giving them love and attention back. And I'm hiding my symptoms and my disease, which sometimes you need to do, but sometimes you got to push yourself. I have to push myself. I won't speak for anybody else, but I need to push myself to get out there more.
Yeah,
So,
I find that basically all the things that you read about that are good for everybody are just that much more important for us, right? Like
I agree
gratitude.
with that. I
Like,
agree with that, that I think that very few people in the world get through life. We're all going to die sometime, right? Sometime in our life, we're going to have a challenge, be it physical, emotional, or a disease process. And I think we have an opportunity with a chronic illness to learn some of those life skills that are really important and grounding no matter what you're going through. The mindfulness and the gratitude for me get me through things like, teaching teenagers how to drive, doing deep breathing exercises were important. In a stressful delivery, when I was delivering patients, I had to be the one in charge, and I didn't always feel very in charge. So I've seen somebody's hand up.
yeah,
So
Lori.
and so patient.
Lori, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, it's nice to see some familiar faces. I met a lot of you in Barcelona. I'm Richelle. I can't remember how we exactly hooked up, but we did. And Claudia. I write for Parkinson's News Today and some other places. I'm a global ambassador for PMD Alliance. But I just recently, I haven't written about it yet, but it will be coming out. I had an abnormal mammogram this last week. So far, it seems good. I have a couple people I'm getting second opinions, but I don't know if you're like collecting data on that or whatever. I'd be happy to share mine or whatever. Like I said, I haven't really gotten all my details yet, but so far it looks fine. And even if it's not fine, the treatment is like the same. It's so tiny what they saw. But I just want to stress to get your mammograms, because I get mine every single year. And this is the first time that they basically were like, okay, we need to really look at this. But coincidentally, I'm postmenopausal.
Right. So I think part of what we're looking with the Michael J. Fox, the surveys ongoing is just general health histories. And so we're asking for comorbidities or other disease processes or diseases that women have. That's partly why it hasn't come out all at once. Otherwise, we'd be asking you to spend, hours answering questions about your life. So yes, if you can contribute that data, I think that's significant. I don't know that there's enough data yet on women in Parkinson's disease, much less women in Parkinson's disease with abnormal mammograms. But you bring up a very vital point. Sometimes we're kind of focused on PD management, and I think it's really important to remember that we are a whole human being and that our teeth need attention. Our teeth may even need more attention with some of the medicines we take because we don't make saliva the same way. We need to get our annual mammograms. We need to do pap smears. There are general health things that we can't ignore just because we have Parkinson's. So I don't mean to be on a soapbox, but
Yeah, I mean, just to come in, sorry that you're going through that, Laurie.
yes, Lori.
And, hopefully it'll come out the right side. But I have to say, just in terms of engaging with women with Parkinson's, I have heard, not an insignificant amount of women having a breast cancer diagnosed either pre or post Parkinson's. So I think it is an area that will be interesting to explore in terms of the hormone treatment that women get breast cancer and the impact of, on Parkinson's developing or, during, and also then in terms of, HRT issues. So that's the point, is that we are complex beings with all our hormones, and a lot of research has ignored this for years, decades, and we're realizing that it's something that we need. So, it's really great that you're speaking out about it, Laurie, because it'll allow other women to speak it out. And that's where we start to go, okay, maybe there's a pattern here. Maybe there's something that we need to ask. And I was only talking to a woman about this. I do a callback service, a dietitian one for the Parkinson's Association of Ireland. And a woman had mentioned about having a diagnosis. And I just said, look, maybe bring this information about hormones in women with Parkinson's to your oncologist to discuss and link in with your neurologist. So it's really important not, as Kat said, to have the things completely separate. And I just want to mention, on that note of postmenopausal women, I think it's a group that we haven't, there's definitely a survey about it, but I think there's a big need to really look at that section of women with Parkinson's, because there's really quite shocking statistics about women ending up in nursing homes earlier, and not having care partners. And also there was a study done by a Spanish group, the Hebron group, who basically showed that two of the biggest differences between premenopausal, menopause, and postmenopausal women, where postmenopausal women particularly suffered from gastro issues and genital issues in terms of so there are specific things that need to be taken into account. And interesting, in terms of recent research, I saw that was a lot of the medication that's used to help women sort of control their urinary flow, that they're not incontinent, actually are associated with the risk of developing dementia. And a lot of people don't know this. And obviously women tend to have a lot of urinary issues and are put on these meds, and potentially they're
more at risk for neurodegenerative disease. Yeah.
But also, when you have Parkinson's, you're more at risk of dementia, having these drugs are used to manage your waterworks. So these are kind of things that we need to know and educate women, and for women to be able to ask their clinicians about,
Yeah.
Well,
I'm excited about it soon. I just don't know when. It's kind of raw yet.
Yeah,
fair
absolutely.
Enough, Lori, fair enough. Yeah.
I just wanted to raise a quick question that someone submitted to us online, and I don't know if Kat or Richelle, you can address this. It might be out of our scope, but does YOPD affect menstrual cycle?
Yeah. So in terms of, does it change the length of it?
Mm.
So yes.
Let's say anyway.
Yeah. So certainly, anecdotally, I have heard people say that it's changed the length of their cycle. So again, this is something that we need more information on, and what are the ramifications of that? Because it's kind of like this is not a vicious circle, but I think they probably do impact each other. So
and I wonder
if
also it may what's the word? Oh, they may have more rapid menopause too. I have heard that anecdotally also. I think that the answer is we're collecting data, we're learning, and we don't totally know the answer to that, but I would agree with Richelle that anecdotally we've heard online and in groups that their cycle is different once their Parkinson's symptoms start. So
yeah, and another question we got was, and this is just in general, which applies to all, anyone with Parkinson's disease or anyone with an illness, is that one woman asked, do we find ourselves, or do you find yourselves hiding your symptoms from non-PD friends, or not being as honest or as open with your non-PD friends about what you're going through?
Yeah, I think it's probably I think a fair comment. I think that's why it's really important to have, like, I'm so blessed to have our group, is because this is just easier to share with people who kind of just get that, and you don't feel like you're moaning all the time about the bits and pieces. So I don't think it's I don't necessarily not mention it to my friends, but I feel I don't need to, because I've got such a supportive group of women with Parkinson's who can actually identify and maybe give some suggestions as what works for them. So in our Marco Polo group, we put out, you know, a video about something, and you know, I go to bed and the next morning I'll have 5 videos of people sort of identifying with what I've gone through, and you know, giving, you know, what their experience has been about dealing with it. So
I can't tell you how much more optimistic I feel than I did last week when I was reading the unmet needs of women with Parkinson's yet again, because I was feeling like none of these, we were learning all the, just the, you know, tip of the iceberg on all these issues, and that nothing was being done about it. But it is, there are things being done about it. So thank you for leading it for us. We have some great events coming up. On September 11th, you can join us for a breath workshop with certified yoga instructor Betty Willens. And on September 14th, we will be introducing our community to LA County's new movement disorder specialists. Links to registers for these events, as well as updates for all of our programs, will be sent out to our email list. Today's event was made possible by our sponsors, Abbott, Boston Scientific, Kiowa Kirin, and Supernus, and by you. By donating to PCLA, you can join us in our mission to improve the lives of families in our community living with Parkinson's. PCLA is a nonprofit and all donations are tax deductible. If you enjoyed today's program, please visit pcla.org and make your donations so that we can continue to provide free programming like this. You can reach out to us with questions at info@pcla.org or call us at 310-880-3143. Thank you, everyone. It was a really fascinating morning. Have a wonderful and safe weekend.